Greetings, ladies and Mandeljets, and welcome to this latest episode of Tales from Outer Space, where I take a space-related story from around the internet and read it out loud for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below. Please don't forget to do the usual YouTube gumph, because if you don't, the nanite swarms will steal your other sock. But more importantly, as always, I hope that you enjoy. I'd quickly like to thank the following Tier 5 patrons and channel members for supporting the channel: Datamagnet and Bob the Dragon. Thank you very much. Story number 1. Half a Gram, written by ManBearScientist. The second confirmed extraterrestrial contact was in 1996, August 22nd to be precise. An absolutely satisfactory Thursday. Cloudless with reasonable temperatures, perfect for a trip to the park or an early morning run. Not that there was a park in that small town, nor anyone that ran. In fact, at the time of touchdown, not a single one of the town's 307 residents was actually outside. You could probably separate those residents into 3 groups. First were the children, who had just started a new year of school and mostly saw the day's perfection as an insulting reminder of an ended summer. And then you had the adults, working either in the school themselves or traveling to the closest major city. Finally, you have the senior citizens. Of the 3 groups, they probably spent the most time outside. However, it was 10:30 a.m., and there was a routine to be kept. 10:30 meant one thing only. It was time to meet the Moe's. Of course, Moe's wasn't the name of the restaurant. The original Moe's Diner had closed down in 1978 when the mill left. But to the old-timers, it was and always would be Moe's, no matter who currently owned it or how many times they tried to correct them. Of course, if any outsider asked for directions, they would be given a series of hints referring to other places that no longer existed. Right past Pickerel Corner, take a left where the farmhouse burned down. You can't miss it. The one thing that hadn't changed was Moe's special. For $6.50, you got chicken fried steak, homemade gravy, your choice of vegetable, a salad, and a pair of biscuits everyone knew came from the store. For the old-timers, this was simply known as the usual. At the time of contact, the regulars were currently enjoying the usual and their favorite activity, gossip. If the diner had more than one waitress, they probably would have noticed. But at the time, the sole waitress, owner, and cook spent most of her time during the dead hours gossiping right along with the regulars. When the doorbell rang, she assumed it was just another regular and went up to cook another batch of the usual. Of course, she probably should have gone to ask for their order, but it was 10:40, and the only one person ever comes in at 10:40. She didn't hear the rumble of his pride and joy pull up, but it wasn't too weird. She rarely heard the tan 69 Charger when she was up gossiping. And if the regulars had earned the name, Paul was a cut above the rest. You could count the number of times he'd missed his get-together in one hand, and you wouldn't need the hand to count the numbers of times he actually arrived on time. He ordered Moe's special with coffee, black, and preferred green beans over corn and cottage cheese over salad. When she finished, she put the plate on the corner for Paul to pick up and went back over to the gossip. It took her 10 minutes to realize that Paul had never joined the group, and another 10 minutes to realize the plate had been emptied and left in the counter on the other side of the diner. Furious at the dine and dash, she walked up to put the plate away and realized that the customer had left something on the table. Gold, half a gram, about half the size of a penny, worth exactly $6.50. That, at least, was the story. The next day, she learned why Paul never made it. His prize charger wouldn't start. Right before he went to leave that morning, there was a bang from out in the field, and then all the power went out. He reported the outage and went to go to Moe's while the transformer was replaced, but the charger wouldn't start, wouldn't even turn. An hour later, the lights kicked back on. The power company said the transformer was perfectly fine. The next day, Paul was back at Moe's, and everything went back to normal. Then it happened again, a little over a year later, Friday, September 12th, 1997. And again on October 3rd, 1998. Once every 384 days, an unseen visitor replaced Paul at the daily Moe's meetup and paid in gold, always in exact change. It wasn't until 2004 that anyone outside the town caught on. A high school senior that worked at the diner on weekends learned of this mysterious guest and wrote a column in the school's newspaper about the local hauntings and poltergeists, and mentioned the stranger at Moe's as one of the prominent examples. A bored traveler on January 5th, 2004, sits down, picks up a school paper, and tries to pass the time while they wait for food. They don't believe a word, until the waitress gets up and goes to the far side of the diner and picks up a tiny piece of gold from the far side of the diner. They share their experience on the conspiracy blog when they get home, and over the time a fair number of paranormal tourists begin to make a trip to Moe's as one of the stops on their haunted house trip. An FBI agent recently moved upstate takes a trip to Moe's on Sunday, January 23rd, 2005. He hears the story about the gold and suspects that it is a cover for some sort of illegal operation. After seeing the waitress palm the gold, he is sure of it. He asks for the owner, and the waitress tells him that she is the owner and the cook, and that she was sure that the food was fine and doesn't want to hear any fuss. A flip of the badge, and she shuts up. He checks out the kitchen and the register, and other than it being relatively unclean, he can't find any untoward. She tells him her story, but he remains suspicious. Anyway, that is how it started. Any questions? Good. The FBI agent, a Mr. John Dalworthy, became a regular at the diner, a side effect of being stationed out in the middle of nowhere. He was both time to kill and is bored enough to sit and wait for another mysterious visit. At first, he stays primarily for the thrill of the hunt, but after a while, he mostly comes for the food and to say hello to the other regulars. Every day he notes in his journal the time he enters and leaves, whether or not the stranger arrived, and any other odd occurrences. These notes are how we learned of the alien's 384-day pilgrimage and of the powerful neurocognitive effect it has on outsiders. John was in town for 3 of the stranger's arrivals, and each time noted that he spent an extra 12 minutes at the diner without realizing it or noticing any creature enter or leave. Of course, it takes many more years to thoroughly understand the phenomena. By the late 2010s, the US government had formally recognized that the event was extraterrestrial in nature. By the 2020s, it had set up a permanent network of drones around the town and detected the telltale signs of an alien ship bursting through the warp bubble around what the regulars call Paul's place, though Paul hadn't been alive for 15 years at that point. By the 2030s, the observation of the pilgrimage had led an enormous breakthrough, the creation of the warp drive, derived mostly from reverse engineering of the aliens' idle ship on these trips to Moe's. It was this warp drive that enabled humanity to leave Earth. The principles of the warp drive are now known even to schoolchildren, but at the time they were miraculous and almost magical. The complex space-time geometries of the lattice allowed for folds, but only in specific locations. It was nearly impossible to predict where a fold could or could not be made, nor to know the size of a fold before it was made. Indeed, there was only 3 spots in the soul capable of folds, and only one of those spots connects to anything useful. That spot, of course, is Paul's Point, the hub of interstellar transport for the Sol system. The first tests of the warp drive involved sending a drone through Paul's Point and recording the surroundings. The expectation was that the drone would discover some form of odd alien homeworld, and many were even afraid of causing hostile reactions. However, what they actually found was barely a habitable moon, with a small atmosphere rich in oxygen and nitrogen. Around the exit were a number of shiny oblong housings. They did not stay long enough to get a detailed view, but they did discover that the other side was inhabited. I'll let my colleague Bez 13th generation tell the rest. Pop, crackle, hiss. Greetings, humans. I am Bez, daughter of 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 Bez. Our species is extremely different from Homo sapiens. We have a hive structure led by a queen and have clearly defined larval, pupal, and adult forms. The founder of the current hive was Bez, first generation, as was customary for queen broods. Bez was one of many competing broodlings. She alone possessed the queen's mutation of neurocognisis, and for this advantageous deformity, she was targeted by the other broodlings. They forced her into exile, before she reached the adult stage and her powers bloomed. It was known that our moon, Nazan, possessed breathable air and several warp points, one such point connected to our planet, giving the moon its atmosphere and letting us move back and forth on the warp ships without needing propulsion systems. The moon does not, however, possess any multicellular life beyond basic algae. Exile to the moon would limit Bez's nutrition intake and ensure a deformed, insignificant adult. Bez, however, was not content to munch algae and grow weak. She used the remaining fuel in her ship's warp drive to make a shorter jump. While she could not return to the planet proper, distance through warp points is highly variable. The warp between Nezan and Bull's Point is one of the lowest on record. She emerged onto your world, elated to land on a planet with flora and fauna. However, she found the gravity on your world to be far lighter than our home planet, now called Bez. In a larval stage and without effective weaponry on her ship, she would fare little better than non-Nezan, as most of the creatures grew far larger than those on our planet. She wandered aimlessly, hoping to find a hunting grounds that would be safe enough for her to grow to adulthood and with enough prey for her to create a marvelous pupa. That is, until she found the aluminium chapel. The human at the chapel, known as Mose, saw Bez salivating at the smells emanating from the chapel and took her in. I am told that it took a great deal of courage, as the larval stage is supposedly quite revolting to humans. It has been described as a cross between a tarantula and a koalas, and is slightly smaller than even your infants. Mose hid Bez from other humans and fed her as would any other of the regulars, a steady serving of Mose special. This was ideal for the developing queen, delivering high amounts of fats and raw calories that she needed to develop. Its effect was even stronger than the royal jelly we feed to our broodlings, and triggered an especially intensive epigenetic polymorphic shift once the queen reached a pupal stage. The rest, they say, is history. Bez was able to reach adulthood under Mose and had a great reverence for the generosity. She reached a pupal stage in a farmhouse nearby, and the exothermic metamorphosis created enough energy to cause a small fire nearby. Once she reached adulthood, she was able to tap into the electric network to restore the power to her ship, allowing her to return to Nezan and then to Bez. Her glorious ascension was swift and led Bez to the fourth epoch. Such was its glory, how people wished only to learn of the secret of her transformation. She told us of Mose and the aluminium chapel, and we fell into prayer. Our queens learned more of your world, of your customs and money. But that knowledge did not stop our prayers. We began to create chapels of our own, and once every year, on Ascension Day, the foremost queen takes a pilgrimage to the chapel of Mose and feasts upon the Mose special. We are not longer such a religious people, but we still honor the bravery and generosity of your race and the traditions of Ascension Day. We hope to forever be a regular at the Aluminium Chapel and an ally at your side. The students rise to applause the guest lecturer after the narration device finishes. The small furry humanoid steps down from the podium, about 2 feet in height. It has to climb a specifically sized ladder to reach the floor. For these students, this was a rare honor, a royal visit at Dalworthy Hall. They were here because they wanted to be explorers, astronauts, warp junkies. If you wanted to warp, you went to the Nezan Academy, located near Bez's Point. Its aluminium walls contained most of the knowledge both species had accumulated on warp travel. It wasn't hard for the humans to adjust to life on Nezin. After all, Nezin's gravity was 0.94 Gs, and the human food court was at a top rate. It was little harder for the descendants of bears proper. Not only did they have to deal with the much lower gravity, they had a hard time adjusting to the size of the university and to dealing with the moles. On the plus side, up here, even workers and drones were allowed to feast on the nutrient-rich human food. As was tradition, they paid primarily in gold stock. The discovery of large quantities of gold and bez had rapidly depreciated its value, but it still only took half a gram of gold to pay for a meal. The human establishments never griped at their insistence in avoiding credit. They do, however, wish that the bez would learn to tip. End of story. Story number 2. Everyone Comes from Earth, written by Glitchkey. Everyone comes from Earth. No, not that one. Not yours, well, you come from your Earth. I suppose I should clarify. One of the most startling things scientists find upon making first contact with the Federation is that nearly every species named their planet Earth. In their own language, of course. They named it for what they supported them, helped them grow, and allowed them to flourish. Moons, stars, interstellar objects, those all have wildly different naming schemes. But everyone comes from Earth, or the closest thing they have. Most aquatic species in the Federation actually come from sea, for example. The avian species largely come from sky. Now, this isn't always the case. There have been a few one-off races with unusual worlds, but they're pretty self-explanatory in context. The Uriel come from island, because their world is comprised of large archipelagos rather than substantial landmasses. The Cortaloon come from valley, because their uniquely damaged world has a small habitable zone formed as a massive rift valley. The Rarith come from twilight, because their world was tidally locked, and only the twilight between day and night could support life. But still, the meaning is the same. Everyone comes from Earth. Everyone from sky to sea to somewhere in between comes from a world that supported them, cared for them, and is named for what it is. Everyone comes from a world named for their home. In fact, it is such a common aspect of interspecies exchange that everyone comes from Earth is rapidly becoming a near universal colloquialism. It roughly translates to something along the lines of, no matter the differences between us, there is a common ground. That doesn't quite get the intent of the phrase, I know, but I'm sure your kind will pick up the nuances of the phrase as time goes on. So, human, thank you for joining the Federation. We welcome yet another Earth, and look forward to what you bring with you. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.